Are you an established small business owner or aspiring entrepreneur? Would you like professional advice to help your business grow and succeed? Well, look no further. The Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center is the territory's #1 resource to move your business forward. Enjoy no-cost advising, low-cost training, and technical assistance from experts in both the public and private sectors. The VISBDC is nationally accredited and sustained by the University of the Virgin Islands and the U.S. Small Business Administration. Visit us at our locations on St. Thomas, St. John, or St. Croix, and follow us on social media at VISBDC. For easy access to all our training and networking events, be sure to join our newsletter and download the VISBDC app. The Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center, here to help your business start, grow, and succeed.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the VISPDC's hosting of Pivoting for Growth, Turning Challenges into Opportunities. Today's session will equip participants with insights into the importance of adaptability in the business world. Attendees will learn how to pivot effectively in response to changing market conditions and new opportunities. Today's lead presenter is Mr. Langley Shazar. Langley Shazar is a writer, speaker, and advocate with a passion for storytelling, empowerment, and community service. Raised in Bristol, Virginia, and now based in the U.S. Virgin Islands, he engages in civic and creative pursuits, working with organizations such as the American Red Cross and the VI Youth Advocacy Coalition. His background spans process engineering, global operations, and legislative leadership, but his true calling lies in the arts and social impact. An accomplished poet and columnist, Langley has contributed to multiple anthologies, magazines, and newspapers, including his current column, The Lounge, in the St. Thomas Source. He has authored 7 books covering poetry, self-improvement, and inspiration. Through the Casual Word, his YouTube, talk show, podcast, and publishing platform, he fosters a dialogue and uplifts voices in literature and personal growth. A collector of antique books and typewriters, Langley finds inspiration in history, philosophy, and the written word. As pastor of New Life International, he merges faith with action, believing service is a responsibility. His mission is clear: break stereotypes, cultivate awareness, and inspire transformation one word at a time. Here's a friendly reminder to put your questions in the chat, and they will be addressed by the presenting team, either directly in the chat or later during a question and answer segment. A copy of today's presentation will be attached to the post-survey email, and we encourage you to take a few minutes after this training to fill out the survey that lets us know how we're doing. So without further ado, Mr. Shazar, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for that, Ms. Industrious, and thank you to the SBDC for having me back again. It's always a pleasure to be here. I see some people that I believe I recognize already, and I'm glad you guys are finding value in the topics that we're covering and the presentations and workshops. And we're going to continue to bring you all insight and information, and hopefully you can carry that with you in whatever avenue and whatever sector that you operate in, whether you are a small business owner or entrepreneur, or you work in the public sector or in the private sector for someone else. These concepts that we talk about can certainly help increase the overall success of whatever your pursuits look like. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get right into this. So as Ms. Industrious stated, we're going to talk about pivoting for growth and how we turn challenges into opportunities. And before I get into the presentation, just by a show of hands per the reactions, how many people who are here today absolutely love change? How many people really, really love to go in and say, you know what, I hope my day is completely different than anything that I've experienced before. And you guys can go ahead and put those reactions. And even if it's not a positive reaction, put your reaction in the chat, because that's something that is fundamental to our conversation today, is our aversion to change. And that's a human condition, not just something that we see in the Virgin Islands. Now, there's a higher concentration of that because of our close proximity to each other and because of the uniqueness of the geography in which we all live. But it's not just unique to the Virgin Islands. I mean, people don't like change. Once we have gotten into a routine, and we talk about routine in several other workshops, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, and we get into something that feels familiar and a little bit structured, having it disrupted certainly gives us pause and anxiety. But there are lots of opportunities within that change. And we talk often about getting into a place of being uncomfortable, because that's where change begins and that's where change develops. And so today we're going to be talking about pivoting for growth, and how do we turn that challenge into an opportunity. And for those of you who have seen and been part of some of these presentations before, you know that we come from a very human centered aspect, because there are people who have PhDs who do this for a living, who can give you all of the business acumen, and they can give you the textbook. But one thing that I feel that we have overlooked for decades, especially in the Black community, is the importance of our people. And as I spoke about in the previous presentation, about our mental health and our well-being, and making sure that we are being the best versions of ourselves so we can be successful. Those are areas that we're seeing more and more visibility and insight being given to. And so we have to continue to push in that direction, because people are always going to be the most important part of your business or your enterprise. It doesn't matter how great your service is, it doesn't matter how great your product is. If you don't have the correct people in the correct places, and you're not fostering an atmosphere and a community of inclusivity, which we'll talk about in a bit, then you're always going to be falling short to a competition who may have an inferior product but better people. And so we want to make sure that we understand the importance of that as we go through not just this particular workshop, but the next one that'll be coming up, and other opportunities. We'll be talking more and more about this. Thank you again for that introduction. You guys, again, a little bit about me: do a lot of different things, wear a lot of different hats. One, I'm passionate about all of us improving and becoming the best versions of ourselves in whatever capacity and in whatever area that we serve, whether it's public sector, private sector, ministry, working with youth, whatever it is that you do. I want you to be the absolute best at it for yourself, first of all, so that you can be successful in those roles. Today's agenda, we're going to be looking at understanding challenges and opportunities. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on the people-centric approach to pivoting. We're going to look a little bit about stress. Now, I have a presentation about redirecting stress that really dives into different types of stress and how to alleviate those things, how to redirect those things. And so we're not going to spend a lot of time there, but it's important to understand that stress impacts work, stress impacts your people, and stress impacts your business. And so we're going to look a little bit about that. And for those who were in the very first presentation I gave on effective communications, we're going to touch back on that again, because leadership, and for those who are running a business or who are the army of one or team of one, you have to understand that the communication is going to be paramount. And so with your leadership, and as you build a team and as you begin to work with other people, you have to understand and commit to being a very good communicator, in order to make sure that you are presenting not only yourself, but the expectations, and that you're able to empower the people that you work with and around. I'm reading a book now that's called How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. And it speaks to the idea that you don't have to have a title, you don't have to be in a particular position to be a leader. And we need to be doing more of that within our organization. So perhaps you're not running a business, but you operate amongst several people. Excuse me, you can still be leading and encouraging and empowering without having the title or without being the boss, so to speak. Excuse me. And then we're going to talk about cultivating that adaptable and resilient mindset. Because again, there are people out here who can give you all the tools. They've written textbooks and they've written journals and they've written all these different scholarly notes on practical application. But it starts in changing how you perceive and how you view your challenges and how to look for solutions. We talk about being solution based and the fact that whenever a problem presents itself, you've got to be thinking about how do we solve it and not just be focused on the problem. And then we'll wrap it up with creating an atmosphere to overcome challenges. It goes back to the totality of the team. You know, how do you, as a leader, or whether you have the title or not, how do you create an atmosphere where people feel empowered to be part of the solution and part of the change? Here at BIT and other places that I've worked, we talk about change empowerment, and that is equipping the people around you to be able to facilitate change. And we want to make sure that we can start thinking about those things and thinking about how we help those individuals become agents of change and support the change of the organization. So what does it mean to pivot? I love this because I'd never thought about pivoting with intentionality. Oftentimes when we hear pivot, we think of it as, okay, something has happened that's beyond our control. Something has happened and I must make an adjustment. Sometimes that is the case, and you're going to be thrust into an opportunity where you're going to have to change certain things strategically. But also, as we talk about right here, is that it's purpose, right? When you pivot, there is an intentionality behind it. You're not just being drug by your heels, and you're not just a victim of circumstance, but you are actively engaged in what's going to change and happen going forward. And this is in life, in business, whatever area you operate in. Taking authority is what it means to pivot, as you adapt with purpose. And that means that you are not going to say, well, there's nothing I can do, so I just have to go along with this. It's looking at it, finding the solution, and then executing the solution. We'll talk about the continuum of change and that change cycle later on, but it is taking authority and command of the direction that you want to take your organization and command of the direction you want to take your company or your business or your team for that matter. Within an organization or an agency or something that has multiple departments, you can, excuse me, shift the direction and the trajectory of which your team operates. And when I say yours, it may not be that you're leading that team, but you are part of that team and you're part of that collective and that nucleus. And so you have an opportunity to shift and to transform how you all function and how you all operate. And that's what it means to pivot, is to have that intentionality. One other thing that I'll add is to have foresight. Many of us, and I think I've seen this more here than anywhere else, is, I'm sorry guys for the cough, I'm getting over a sinus thing, is that we don't look far enough ahead. In the Virgin Islands specifically, we wait till things happen, even though there have been precursors, there have been warnings, there have been red flags. We wait till it happens, and then we try and scramble and react instead of being proactive. So I would also add that pivoting is being intentional with having foresight and looking beyond and ahead to anticipate obstacles. In the position I'm in now, we call that risk management, risk mitigation. So part of the things that we do when we are looking to develop and execute a program, platform, or project is that we look out ahead and say, okay, based on what we know, what are potential areas and obstacles that we may face as we push this project along? And then as we identify those things, the immediate next step is that mitigation strategy. Okay, if this happens, how do we handle it? If this comes up, what do we do? How do we pivot? And so before the project even gets underway, and of course, there's going to be unforeseen things that happen. That's always going to be the case, no matter what's going on. And this is true of life. But to the best of our ability, we look and anticipate what could possibly go wrong and already have a plan in place to address it. And so when we talk about pivoting, you want to be looking out ahead and making sure that you are putting yourself in the best position to be successful by not being blindsided by things. So, challenges and opportunities. One of the things that I've learned over time is that every single challenge creates opportunity or is opportunity. It's a matter of how you look at it. You can wallow and say, well, I don't know what we're going to do, and this sucks and it's going to be terrible. Or you can say, okay, I see that this is happening. How do we get around it? How do we change it? How do we fix it? So here are some common business challenges. You got market fluctuations, which we are experiencing right now globally with the tariffs and whatnot. So I hope that people are paying attention. We talked about having foresight just a minute ago. Looking out, seeing what's happening globally is a great way, because even though we are insular, even though that we are isolated geographically, we are still going to be impacted economically by what's happening in the world. And I think that's something else that we don't do enough of here in the territory, is look at what's happening in the world. We think that we are insulated because we're away from everything, but we're also very vulnerable for that same fact. And we need to make sure that we are understanding what's happening across the rest of the United States and across the rest of the world, because it all impacts what's happening to us. And that holds true with that competitive landscape, as well as changing customer preference. You know, if the market changes, your customer base changes, and the competition changes, well, you've got to know, right? How do we adjust to that? How do we plan for that? How do we change? What are we going to do? How do we pivot? And one of the things I want to add right here is some information that I just got this morning. I'm taking a course on high stakes leadership from the University of Michigan on how to lead in times of crisis. And a writing that came out in 1986 lists 9 types of business crisis. So I'm going to tell you guys those just real quick to add to your memory banks. Go ahead and file that away, because it goes right into common business challenges. And these are other things that have high impact and can have high probability, especially here in the territory. So the first one is public perception. Number 2, product failure. Number 3, market shift. 4, cash shortage. 5, management change. 6, mergers. 7, regulation and deregulation. 8, human capital. And 9, international events. So those are the 9 fundamental types of business crises or challenges, as you want to add into this. So you can see that there are lots of different ways where you can find yourself in a state of flux, in a state of change, in a predicament that's maybe uncomfortable. So we can recognize that these are all areas for opportunity. When you look at what's happening in your particular market, you can identify areas where you can make some adjustment, and maybe it's a service delivery. Maybe it is the product itself. Always analyzing what's happening across the landscape will help you see something coming that maybe someone else doesn't see. Maybe it's something else that someone else in your team didn't recognize, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But we want to make sure that we are capturing and at least being aware and exposed to what's happening across the landscape. If you are working in the public sector, there's a lot of different things you have to keep track of. A lot of different things that are happening. but they're all areas for opportunity. Maybe opportunity means you remove a service that you are not doing very well. That's something that we don't want to talk about as often, but sometimes we are committing ourselves to something that's failing because we are afraid of making the change. When the change is what's going to propel us to the next level and move us into a next area of success. So we want to recognize there are potential opportunities in every single challenge that we face and every single change that comes our way. And this is what makes us adaptable, right? Is if you can be out in front, have that foresight, be proactive, then you can be moving and transforming faster than the competition in a place where you are delivering a service. Perhaps you are able to get out in front of a change and your service model will improve in order to give you greater exposure and more business. Maybe you don't have a competitor per se, but maybe you just want to continue to enhance the customer experience. You might be the only person who provides a particular service, but you want to always continue to enhance what that service delivery looks like. So that's why you want to stay out in front, look at those opportunities, and then adapt and say, okay, I see that there's some changes happening across the landscape. I see that there's some changes happening within the sector that I operate in. Maybe there's a change, just like we talked about on that last slide, in customer preference. If your service model is not meeting the customer needs, well, just because it's been the service model, and we hear this all the time in the Virgin Islands, this is the way we've always done it, right? Just because the way you've always done it doesn't mean that it is now or continuing to be effective in its delivery. So you have to be malleable and flexible enough to take in new information and apply it. So let me stop right there before we go to the next section. And does anybody have any questions? Ms. Industrious, I don't know if you can see the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and ask the question, we can pause right here for that.
I think it's safe to say we don't have any questions in the chat, nor do we have a hand raised.
All right, well, I hope you guys are not confused then. We'll continue to move on to our next section, which is it's the people-centric approach to pivoting. And I'm not going to read these slides verbatim, but we want to make sure that we highlight this particular section because this is where it really becomes important. We talk about the rubber meeting the road. We talk about practical application. It starts with your people. And it starts with fostering this positive work culture. A work culture is the identity of the workspace. This is where the activity happens and the type of activity that occurs within that work environment. Now, this could be in the office, this could be virtual, this could be, again, if you are client facing, service oriented, this could be in that environment. But this is the culture. Culture is what people are going to recognize, both the employees and the customers or clients. So you want it to be positive. And positive doesn't mean that there's not going to be disagreements. Positive doesn't mean that there's not going to be some level of contention sometimes. But what it means is that the overall atmosphere, feeling, vibe, if you will, aura of the organization, when people walk into your space, when people come to interact with your employees or yourself as a leader, that the interaction is positive, that they leave feeling as though their needs have been met, or at the very least, their needs have been heard and taken into consideration. And that's what it means to have that meaningful engagement. So your employees are going to be the front line. The people that you work with, your team is going to be the front line. And so you want to make sure that you have equipped them with the expectation of a positive work culture. What I mean here is that we've all been in places, whether it's the drive-through, in the Kmart, down, at the mom and pop shop, wherever. And we've all been in areas where there's some sort of massive argument happening, right? There's some sort of big blow up going on, and it is public, and everybody in the store, everybody in place can hear it. and it makes you uncomfortable. It makes it awkward. And the other side of that equation is most of the time it bleeds over into your interaction. So they've had some big blow up with their manager, and then now they have an attitude with you. Granted, you have nothing to do with what has occurred, but because of the negativity of the environment, is now making a negative impact on the client or the customers. And so the expectation set by management leadership is that's going to be a positive work environment, positive culture. And those in leadership set the precedent for that by their conduct, their behavior. We'll talk more about the communication aspect and having those open door policies and confidentiality and all these different attributes. But you have to set the stage for the culture to be positive. You have to exhibit positive behavior, engagement, empathy, caring, active listening, in order to be able to have your employees feel confident that they can do the same, and also that they will emulate the expectation set by the company. So we talked about change empowerment. It used to be called change management, but we really want to get away from that because you're not really trying to manage change, you're trying to empower change. Management is a byproduct of the empowerment process because you're going to be monitoring what happens. But if you don't empower people to embrace and facilitate change, well, then you're just managing chaos. And so what we want to make sure is that you are giving them the agency to be creative and to make change, and the tools, whether you need actual equipment, software, support, the open door policy where you need to be able to have candid conversation, or a community aspect where the whole team gets together and they can speak freely. Those are all tools to help facilitate change. Also, I will say this, having them involved, and we talked about this in the last presentation, having them involved in the planning of the change is paramount to change acceptance and adaptation, right? And adoption. If you just show up one day and you say, this is what we're doing, you're going to get a lot of pushback. It's going to be very difficult for that change to happen, to go smoothly, and to work long-term and be sustainable. So we want to make sure that you give the team opportunity for input. Now, again, this doesn't mean that you're going to do everything they suggest or everything they want to have happen, but the floor being open for genuine discourse and dialogue at least lets them know that, okay, cool, we've had our conversation, they'll do what they can, and whatever happens, great, we can help move forward. Now, of course, you're going to have an actor or two who's going to have a problem with the fact you didn't take their idea and use it. But you can't please everybody. It's not your job to please everybody. It's your job to take all the information and to make an informed decision for the betterment of the company and the future of the organization. So, excuse me, those things are foundational to supporting organizational change and empowering change, and then giving them that ownership. Once if they have presented an idea, give them the opportunity to move with that idea. If it's in their wheelhouse, if it's in their skill set, let them run with it. One of the things that I've seen a lot is you bring your team in, your team has conversation, your team brings ideas to the table, the team and everybody agrees upon the direction and the strategy, the roadmap, and then you bring in outside resources to do the same job that the team could have done. And that really presents a lot of resentment, and it also presents a lot of obstacles which you have to overcome and manage. So if you've got a capable team, and I talked about this last time, you hire subject matter experts and people with skills to do certain jobs. So when the opportunity presents itself for them to execute in their roles, you let them. And that's how you create that ownership and building that confidence. And this is where that growth mindset comes in, because it will help them and encourage them to continue to operate in excellence. And the entire team is going to flourish because everyone feels not only connected, they feel valued, and they also feel empowered to help move the company forward. So morale is an area that I hear often across all sectors. You hear it if you guys watch the Senate hearings. The question is always asked is, what's the organization, what's the agency's morale like? How does everybody feel about working there? This goes back to that positive work culture. And it matters because, as it says here, right, the well-being of the team is directly related to how well the team operates. How well does it produce? How well does it show up? How well does it execute? And all that matters. And this is where, excuse me, I'm sorry, we have to continue to create that safe, that positive work environment and work culture. And these are some of the things that you can do to ensure that's happening. Right? That is the emotional safety and support, open door policy, confidentiality. We talked about that. When someone brings something to you in confidence, keep it there. It makes no sense that when people come in and say something that before they walk out of your office, other people in the office know about it. That's craziness. And then we got to celebrate our progress and our learning. And then feedback. We talked about that in effective communication. The feedback's important because we've got to make sure that you as a leader or the owner, you don't know everything. You're not always going to get it right. We're always going to be both teachers and students. And so it behooves us to make sure that we're getting feedback, not only on our performance and how we're leading and how we're directing the organization, but also on what we can all do as a unit to improve the overall atmosphere and morale of the organization. And this is how you create that team to be resilient, right? They trust you because we can communicate. We know what the goals are. We know how the company feels, what direction they're going in, but they've also accepted our input into that direction. And right, we all support each other in those goals, and we support each other in those initiatives and those opportunities. So I'll pause here before we go into the next section. And so if I have any questions or
Yes,
any,
we do. We
okay,
have
great.
someone asking you to repeat. When opportunities arise in people's wheelhouse, do you let them run with it?
Absolutely. And now it's not a broad brush approach, right? We have to use common sense and your leadership skills. If it's in their wheelhouse and they have exhibited the skill set in order to execute that well, then yes, one of the greatest destroyers of morale and confidence is to have someone who knows how to do something and bring someone else in to do that job. And we do that a lot here. We'll go get contractors, we'll go get vendors and other people to come in and do the exact same thing, often for more money than the person that you have right here sitting in the next cubicle or down the hall. Any other questions?
Thank you for that. Not at this time.
All right. Well, we'll speed this up a little bit, guys. I did want to spend some time there because this was the meat and potatoes, so to speak, building your team and the human centric portion of it. So we're going to pick the pace up a little bit, and we're going to get through the stress stuff, just because stress plays an integral part of how your team's going to operate and how your team's going to perform. And so here's some of the strategies as we talk about stress. Again, there's a whole other workshop. If you guys are interested in that, we can contact me about that later, that talks deeply about stress and how we redirect stress and how it affects you as an individual. But for this, we just want to know that we want to hide the fact that when you're creating that positive work culture and that positive environment, you as a leader should be able to recognize when your team is under stress. And I don't mean just stress at work. When they're under stress from something else that's not work related, you should be able to recognize that. So the decreased performance, the burnout, they're going to be disengaged. They're going to be exhausted. People are going to be quitting left and right. That's a big deal because a lot of leaders don't want to recognize that they're the problem. And it may not be personal, but it may be your leadership style. It may be your inability to lead. It may be that you don't have that open door policy, or maybe you don't accept information or advice. It could be a number of things, but suffice to say that if your organization is turning over a lot, then there's something fundamentally incorrect with your organization and with the leadership. Don't be afraid to take a step back and say, okay, guys, what are we doing that no one wants to work for us? What are we doing that no one wants to be here? What are we doing that is keeping us from being successful? We can't always point the finger at everything else that's happening. Sometimes we are the problem. And those proactive measures, we talked about having foresight to help minimize stress. And we understand that there's a certain amount of a level of stress that comes with work in general, timelines and deadlines and reports and reporting up and leadership and all that. There's a amount of stress that comes with that, but it shouldn't be so stressful that people don't enjoy being there and don't want to work, or they're so stressed out that they can't perform well and they crumble under pressure. So mindfulness practices, flexible work schedules, and mental health resources. For those of us who work in the government, there are, mental health resources are mostly free. Even if you don't work in the government, if you're in the private sector or you're running your own business, there is a wealth of free resources available. You can get online, you can search them, you can Google them, you can use your large language model to identify the websites, but there are lots of resources out there to help people if they need to talk to somebody. We did touch on this in the last workshop about flexible work schedules. I know that this cannot work for every instance and every sector or industry. However, we are in the digital age, high into the digital age. And there's honestly no reason why, if you work behind a desk, that you don't have some flexibility. A lot of us just want to see people in the office, but it doesn't mean they're being productive. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there's a difference between being busy and being productive. And a lot of people are just sitting at their desk being busy because they have to be there and they're not getting any work done. And there's been lots of studies shown. There's a whole almost continent-wide initiative in Europe where they went to 4-day work weeks, and all the studies, all the reports they got back showed increased morale, they showed increased productivity, and they showed a healthier work environment. So, take some time and consider making some flexible work schedules if your organization's operating structure can do that. And then just mindfulness practices. Give your people time to breathe. There's no reason to be 1,000 miles an hour, excuse me, from sun up to sundown, from 8 to 5, whatever the schedule is. Give them time to breathe. And I'm not saying, oh, they have their lunch hour. That's an archaic way to look at taking care of your people. If they don't have anything going on, and I will say this, I have always believed that in an organization that is performance-based, i.e., you have projects, deadlines, and things that are due. If the work is being done and the things are being done on time, this goes back to being busy versus productive. If this person has gotten their work done early, it is okay for them to take a break. It is okay for them to relax. It's okay for them to surf the web or whatever. And they don't have to be doing something for the sake of doing something to look busy. So that's a place where leadership can really step in and encourage that kind of productivity and efficiency. If I'm paying you because I need you to do this task, and this task, and it's taking you 3 days where it should have taken you 5, well, guess what? I'm not going to pack you back in with 2 more days of work. I'm going to reward you by letting you just take it easy for the next 2 days because you've done what I asked you to do. Different mindset, it's worth considering, because this is part of that supportive environment. Right? Open communication, resources, the work-life balance, we just talked about that. So when you can support people through what's happening in the office and to an extent out of the office, we don't We don't want to get into a place where we're showing favoritism, or the worst side of that is nepotism, and getting people to get more privileges than other people. We don't want to do that. We want to have equity, but we want to make sure that people know that we care about what's happening to them and we care about what's happening to them at work as well as outside of work. And to whatever extent possible, we will be there to support and help and encourage them so that they can be successful in and out of the office. And I will stop there if anybody has any questions about.
No questions at this time.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for staying tuned in. We're almost done here. Well, so we'll get into effective communication. Again, we've touched on that in depth. So we'll just go through this briefly. And again, this presentation will be available for you guys to read and to disseminate at your leisure. So we're just going to look at, right, transparent communication. It builds trust, it builds accountability, and helps with decision making. This is for the entire team. This is not just for leadership. You want your team to trust you, but you want to be able to trust them. That only happens if you guys can communicate openly and honestly. And then honesty, and I will say this here, is not aggressive, and it's not belittling, and it's not condescending. We think that being real, especially in the VI, means being rude, and it's not. So we need to get out of that assumption as well. It's not about being rude and hateful and argumentative or aggressive. It's simply about being able to honestly discuss what's happening internally or how it's affecting what's happening externally. If you got a service model or a product, maybe the product's malfunctioning, let's have an open conversation about what we can do better. And enhancing that enhances the accountability. Everybody takes ownership. Everybody gets excited about where we move forward. And then we can all make a decision as a unit on what we want to do and the direction that we want to take the organization. So the leadership skills with effective communication and effective leadership is the active listening and empathy. This goes back to just understanding that, hey, there's some things that are going on. I recognize that you're not yourself. What's happening? Let's just have a conversation, a candid conversation, a confidential conversation. I want to reiterate that. And active listening is that you're not distracted, that you're focused on what the individual is saying. And again, in that presentation, there are tools and steps to practice active listening. And you guys can refer back to those things, or we can talk about that at a later date. And then you being adaptable as a leader is staying calm under pressure, being able to not be overly emotional. It's okay to be passionate, but not to be emotional. And there's a difference between the two. And making sure that people understand that you care about what's happening, but you're not angry and bursting. I'm reading a book called How to Untie the Balloon by Ryan Dunlap, who's a former hostage negotiator. It talks a lot about conflict resolution, conflict management, excuse me, especially in leadership. That's one of the things that they talk about all the time is your character, staying calm, de-escalation. And a lot of times it's the leadership who feels offended and gets riled up. And then that just closes off the whole conversation, and it becomes more of a yelling and screaming match, and different things start to occur that are all negative and have negative side effects. So we want to make sure that as leaders, business owners, team leads, whatever your role is, that you have to be the person to remain calm and to help de-escalate the situation and to bring a calm atmosphere to where people don't feel like they have to get loud to be heard. And that's part of what you have to do as a leader. And collaboration and feedback. A big way to mitigate stress is to collaborate. Some of us are stressed out because we want to take on everything. We don't want to let anybody else do anything. We feel like we're the only person that can do it right, quote unquote. And that's not the case. Just because something is done differently doesn't mean it is incorrect. We've got to stop conflating those two things. Incorrect means that it's not going to work. Different just means it's a different approach to the same solution. And if you're solution based and not problem focused, then you're able to see that there are lots of different ways to solve a problem. And so with collaboration, you can divvy up the workload and you can help alleviate a lot of stress in the environment and with your people by allowing everyone to have a voice and everyone to be part of the problem solving exercise and everyone to be able to have agency and autonomy and authority. And this gives them back some level of ownership, as we've already discussed. And all this stuff builds to a positive work environment that breeds success and opportunity. So the resilient mindset, this is everything we've been talking about, is building that mindset and changing your perspective and the way that you approach obstacles and challenges. I love this quote by Sidney Poitier, that if you focus on your problems, you will have more problems. We just talked about that. If you focus on solutions, you will have more opportunities. So when you're solution based and not problem focused, you'll see where the solutions lie, that proverbial silver lining. And this is the foresight and being proactive is that culture of continuous improvement. And this came from a different presentation. The presentation escapes me, but we were talking about the continual improvement process. The art of slowing down is where this came from. And we frame this in the context of looking at yourself, but it also holds true in looking at your organization and looking at your team. And this is a practical application, something that you guys can take away with you today that you can start to utilize and employ. Set a scheduled check-in with your team at regular intervals. Now, this check-in is not a report. This check-in is not a formalized meeting. This check-in is not a venting session either. This is simply, hey guys, how's everyone doing? What's happening in your department? What's happening with your workload? What's happening outside of work? As a matter of fact, I'm getting ready to do that with the team that I'm involved in next week. It'd be informal. I'm just going to gather everybody around. We're going to pull up some chairs and I'm just going to check in. My job is to help them be successful. My job is to empower them, to give them that space to be creative, to problem solve, to do their research. And my job is to remove any impediments and obstacles. So we're going to talk about what they see, what they've experienced, where can I assist, what can we do better, you know, and what everybody needs. Maybe they see something that's happening outside of work. Maybe they need an extra day off. Maybe they need some help with a workload because they're overwhelmed. If you don't give them space and opportunity to talk about that, you're never going to know. And this goes back to the second part. What do you need to adjust? And then what do you need to add to your plan? What do you need to remove from your plan? And that's a balancing act. Sometimes it's going to be, you need more resources. Sometimes you need less work. Sometimes you need more hours. Sometimes you need some days off. It just all depends on what's happening within that process. But if you don't have the conversation, then you're not going to know what needs to adjust. And this is the cycle. You assess where you are, and then you strategize on where you're trying to go. You execute on that strategy, and then you review what went well, what didn't go well, and you do it all over again. And that's the continual improvement process and application cycle. You look at, and you can set a clock or a calendar event, whatever works for whatever it is that you guys are doing, and you look at it and say, okay, what are we doing today? How does this work with where we want to be and where we're trying to go? All right, so we've got some roadmaps, we've got deliverables, we've got some steps, some action items. We do those things, and then we go back and we review. And a review is important because this is where you'll learn what needs to happen going forward or what needs to happen the next time. And in an environment and in a world that is rapidly changing, and you know, one day it's one thing, one day it's something else, and then it goes back. You got to be able to be malleable and what I call pivotable. And you got to be able to do that by continually thinking about where we are, where are we going, what do we need to do, how do we get there, right? Okay, we've made some steps. How did they go? What did everybody think? How do you feel? What needs to be different? And continue to have that engagement across the entire organization. And we talked about encouraging innovation and a safe space for experimentation. One of the things that I've experienced more times than I can count is that I interview and people are like, man, we love the way your mind works and you're going to be such a value add to our organization. This is going to be so great. And we're looking so much forward to it. And then you get in, you start asking questions and you start doing things different. You start rocking the boat and they're immediately like, wait, that's not what we meant. Right. I'm sure many of us have felt that or seen that from the outside. And you've got to give people a space to be them and a space to be able to be experimental. You know, if you're bringing in, this goes back to the subject matter expert comment. If you're bringing in innovative thinkers, you've got to give them space to be innovative. You can't bring in someone to think outside the box because you need new ideas and then close them in that box. And then we do that a lot. We bring people in and then we shut the gate on them. And then we wonder why our best and our brightest are leaving. We wonder why there's low retention. We wonder why there's high turnover, because the very people that we need, we don't actually want them to do anything. I have my own theories about that when it comes to exposing inefficiencies and deficiencies and other activity that's not conducive to positive movement, but that's a different conversation. But we have seen it, we hear about it, we see it all the time. And you have to give those people, and especially this new generation who's grown up a different way, they have different solutions and different ways to address problems. We got to give them room to do that. And that's going to help the sustainability of your organization or your business. And then learning from those setbacks and successes. Success is great, but if you don't ever lose, you're not going to know how to bounce back. You're not going to know how to get better. You're not going to know how to do things a little different. So I'll stop here before we finish up. You might have any questions?
Yes, we had a question earlier. Do you have any additional suggestions for an employee reward system for top performers?
Well, what I would do, and this may sound a little bit interesting, I guess, and this is a leadership thing. What drives your employee or employees? What really gets them going? Because that's what's going to be the ultimate reward. What I mean by that is we've seen the whole pizza party thing as an example. And not everybody eats pizza. No one cares about pizza, right? Maybe it's not you get a day off. Maybe they want to do something different. So what I would do is learn what makes them tick, because the reward has to relate to the people in a way that makes them feel rewarded, right? If no one likes pizza and you give the office a pizza party, no one's going to feel like the work that they did was valued, if that makes any sense. So learn what makes your team work, learn what they like and enjoy, and then build your reward system around rewards that are meaningful to them, not what you think they want. Hope that answered the question.
I believe it does. Thank you.
All right, I see a hand. Was that a hand for a question or?
Hi. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself and was not being given the permission. So good morning, in fact, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your presentation. Is your approach more geared towards private sector? How would you tailor it to the public sector? Well, I'm from St. Lucia. I'm not from the US VI. So I don't know if the policies might be different, but with the public sector, there is a prescribed performance appraisal form.
Mhm.
You don't get a budget in your department for special incentives and things like that. So there's a structure already in place. Now, in terms of the flexi time,
Mhm.
that was not a consideration until COVID, right? Maybe a
Correct.
few companies, both private sector and public sector, maybe a few companies did it. But apart from that, that was a new phenomenon post COVID. So if you could guide me, what can a supervisor
Mhm.
or head of a department within the public sector do where there is already a structure that may not even be flexible? Yes.
Okay, great question, and thank you for that. I work in the public sector also, and one of the things that, as a supervisor, you do have leeway with is your team schedule. So the flexibility of a schedule does not always mean that people are getting a whole lot of time off, but it could be that people are swapping out certain days based on tasks, based on projects. I'm not sure what you guys are all working on, but it could be something so simple as, and I'll say for an example, when I worked at the legislature, we had outdoor space where people would congregate for lunch and different things. One of the things that we started to institute, because we had a small office, was, on a Friday, if the weather was nice, we'd work outside. You just take your laptop outside and you could sit out there and answer your emails and get some sun. And, just that little bit of a break really helped with our morale and help with everybody's energy level. Of course, there's scientific fact behind that. So if your policy and you don't have the ability to make recommendations to policy change in terms of certain incentives, then you have to be creative about what you can do as the leadership of your department. Perhaps it's, hey guys, this week at 12, we're all going to just stop and hang out and watch a movie. Uh, Again, that's just an example, but just start thinking creatively about what is it that you have autonomy to do to help your team be successful and maybe give them a break. And then, you can again poll your team. You guys work in the public sector, so everybody's probably familiar with the policies. So they're not going to suggest things that are going to go against the policy, but they're going to suggest things that you can do that aren't counter to that policy that they would still find to be beneficial. So, you don't have to try and carry the burden of figuring that out on your own. Pull your team and you guys have a conversation about that and see what comes out of it. Hope I answers your question. All right. So we're going to move into, and this is great questions, by the way, great conversation, because this is how we create that atmosphere to overcome challenges, is working together. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, is working together and being able to trust your team and them trust you and you trust each other, right? If maybe somebody who's on this call today doesn't operate in a leadership capacity, but they're part of a team, everyone has an opportunity to lead in some way, shape, or form. But more importantly, you can be part of the solution and part of the positive change. And we look at being resilient, and that's bouncing back from adversity, that's coming back from changes that were unexpected and unforeseen, even though you may be instituting your risk management and your mitigation and trying to make sure that you are looking ahead as far as you possibly can. The way that you can continue to evolve is to train your people. Upskilling helps people, and we talk about morale. Giving people the opportunity to upskill shows them that you're invested in their future, not only for the company, but as a person. And that's a huge psychological advantage because those people will continue to put out the best work because they feel valued. Because every time that they have expressed an interest in learning something new, you've been on board. Man, that's a great idea. Let's figure out how we get you training. Now, I understand from a practical standpoint, there's going to be budgetary requirements and concerns with that. But there are also lots of things people can do on their own. There are lots of things that are free that still qualify in terms of upskilling and training. Be creative, do some research. There's lots of things out there. The class that I'm taking right now, as a matter of fact, that I just mentioned about high-stakes leadership is Coursera. It's one of those online, massive online training courses. The whole consortium of universities are part of this. Right now, the premium is $40 a month. So perhaps you can't foot the bill for a mega training. They have $40 a month, and that's a recommendation. And they can be learning all kinds of things that can translate to real world experience. Just an example, but there's lots of free courses out there as well. Microsoft offers them. Adobe offers some. YouTube, of course. I mean, demonstration of skills, in my opinion, is just as good as having a certification, because some people can blow through a certification and still can't apply those skills. So, be creative again and just let them know that you care about what they are doing. And that training helps you all continue to grow and improve. And the mentorship aspect is that when you have many of us are in what I would say a transitional generation, right? There's a whole generation of leaders that are leaving. Doors are opening for people in their 30s, 40s, 50s to be able to step into some roles. But then there's a whole generation, and here in the Virgin Islands, there's a gap of proficiency with the upcoming generation. And so mentorship also has to be part of what you all are looking at. We talk about that succession plan. And we talked briefly just a minute ago about people being gatekeepers and keeping the door shut. We've got to make sure that we are giving the next generation the opportunity to be successful and to carry the torch when we step aside. We have to be willing to step aside first and foremost, and then give them the tools to help them be successful as they step into those roles, and giving them that ability and the skills and your experience and wisdom to help them thrive in whatever position that they're going to step into. So that's a huge part of being resilient as a leader and as an organization, is that you are setting yourself up for long-term success by grooming the leaders that are coming up behind you. And again, when you get the feedback, as it says here, will allow you to understand what the people would like to see, not only from your constituents, not only from your customers, but from your employees. How do you build a resilient and successful, sustainable organization? Is to get your feedback. What can we do better? What do you all need? What is the next set of people coming up behind you? What are they interested in? How do we position ourselves to be attractive to the next set of potential employees? Those are all things you have to be thinking about as leaders. Long-term success, not just right now. And something that we don't do enough of is incremental progress. That celebration of incremental progress. So many of us, and this is true about life as much as it is about business, we're always so focused on the major win, the big goal, the big change, whatever we've set up for ourselves, that we miss all the positive steps that we've taken to this point. And many people, especially if you're in a leadership position and you've got people who are working for you, are doing great work. And we're missing all that because we haven't seen the big goal yet. And those people feel like none of the work that they're doing to this point matters because the big goal hasn't been attained. So I want to encourage all the leaders who are listening and who will listen to make sure that you're checking in with your team, not only to find out if they're okay, not only to find out what they can do better, but also to acknowledge that you see that they're working hard. Thank them for the things that they've done. Thank them for getting that report in to me on time. Thank you for doing that presentation. Thank you for getting everybody coffee. Thank you for showing up early every day. Hey, I understood that you stayed late the other night. I really appreciate that. You didn't have to do that, but you did. And know that I see that. Those little things matter. And if you are not a leader, but you're part of a team, it's okay to congratulate and acknowledge what your colleagues are doing. Hey man, I was out of here early, but I noticed that you stayed late last night. That's super cool, dude. I appreciate it. Let them know that they are seen, that they are noticed, and they are valued. And we can all do that, no matter what position or where we stand in the company. We can all do that. So, with that being said, I'll leave you guys with my final thought. I'd like to bring a couple of quotes. And pivoting isn't about giving up on the vision. It's about finding a better path to achieve it, or a different path to achieve it. May not be better, it may be more difficult, but you'll still get to the end goal. And the other quote is, change is not a threat, it's an opportunity. Survival is not the goal, transformative success is. And here we've got to stop looking at change as a threat. It is not a threat, it is an opportunity. We cannot be so rigid that we are unwilling to move in a different fashion and do things a little bit differently. And of course, my quote that I came up with is, a dream without action is just a wish. Whatever it is you want to do, wherever you want to be in business or as a person, is going to require you to do some work. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for tuning in with me today. That's my contact information. I am available for other workshops, in-person presentations, more in-depth concepts and ideals, different things we can talk about. So reach out to me if you're interested, and we can talk more about that. And Miss Industrious, before we go into our Q&A section, I will turn it back over to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. So before we allow persons to unmute and ask directly, we're going to revisit the chat. We had a question. What types of rewards do employees find most motivated? Monetary, recognition-based, skill building? Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's going to be employee specific. We as leaders have got to get out of the habit of trying to broad brush a rewards or incentive program. Not everybody's going to respond to. Now, I will say this because of where we are economically, that financial incentive is probably going to be pretty good, right? Everybody's having to work 2 and 3 jobs now here in the Virgin Islands, so that's probably going to be pretty good. But it may not respond to everyone. Now, it's not feasible to do a bunch of different things either. So you're going to have to figure out the vast majority of your team responds to recognition, awards, or monetary, or time off, something flexible. You have to do the majority, right? You obviously you're not going to be able to do something individual for every single person, but find out what the majority of people respond to, and then that's what you go with. You can also do something very unique. You could do a hybrid situation where you have an award structure or an incentive structure, let's say over the course of a year, but every quarter, right, you have 4 opportunities to be incentivized, and every quarter it's different. Maybe in the first quarter, you'll get time off. Maybe in the second quarter, there'll be a financial incentive. This obviously lessens the burden on the organization while still giving everybody an opportunity to have something to look forward to. So there's a couple of ways you do that.
Thank you for that. And while you were making your presentation, we had a comment. We have the flexibility of making recommendations, but getting change is the challenge. We had someone who was leaving saying, thank you very much for your time, your expertise, and this educational offering. They really appreciated the information. It was a good presentation.
Thank
Here's
you.
another question. Do you have any additional suggestions for employee recognition?
I guess it would depend on what your organization can and can't do. What your budgetary constraints are. I'm an advocate of, and I hate to use the term team building, but more of team recess is what I would call that. So it wouldn't be a situation where there's some kind of structured icebreakers and working through issues kind of thing. More of a just like, let's go out as a group and just do something fun, not about work, not about anything, but just to go hang out. I'm a proponent of those. I find, and I participated in several that have been really, really beneficial to getting people to learn about each other, to respect each other, to understand each other more. And also from a leadership perspective, it brings you down to a place of relatability, because a lot of people, a lot of leaders do this. They separate themselves, right, because of title and location within the building physically, right? And so it puts them in this sphere where they feel like they don't have to engage with their team, and their team feels like they're not worthy of engaging with the leadership. And that's never going to work. That's a very archaic way of looking at structure and a hierarchy. And so when you do those types of non-work related group activities, you become a regular person to them as a leader. And that really opens the door to that communication and to building that morale and improving the overall atmosphere of your team.
Awesome. We have another comment. Every department is different, WRT, to the amount of direct interaction with the public. Creativity is a good idea in consultation with the team. Higher management may be concerned about how other departments respond to your department activities, that your creativity cause a revolution. We have another comment asking you to provide your contact information. I guess you could just go back to that slide.
There you go. Yeah, and to the comment about the revolution, I will say this: I have been part of boat rocking, a lot of boat rocking, if you will, and of course, change is uncomfortable, and some organizations kind of oppose that initially until they see the value. So one thing I would encourage is that if you all have a team and everybody's on the same page, is to remain steadfast in your approach and what you guys are doing, because if it is positive change and it's necessary, you may be on an island, no pun intended, for a little while, but you're going to become infectious because people are going to want to do what you're doing, and they're going to want to emulate and repeat the success that they're seeing in your office or your department. So it may look foreign and it may ostracize you all slightly to a degree. But if you are resolute, I have always seen that become successful.
Awesome. We have another comment. This presentation should be shared with the territory governmental offices. Very timely and essential to current work environment. Great job, Mr. Shazer. And then we have persons giving gratitude for the feedback. It's a great presentation. Thank you. And here we have a question.
Mhm.
What is the balance between keeping your authority as management and being relatable to your staff?
Oh, great question. Great question. It's going to be in your tone and your delivery. Someone who's been in leadership in a multitude of arenas, nonprofits, board appointments, public sector, private sector. I always want my team to know that I am completely approachable and that we can always talk about everything. But I also remind them, if there's a policy in place or if there's another hierarchy in place, we have that conversation. And I was like, hey, I got to run this by so and so, or I got to take this up the chain. But I am here to help and empower you to feel confident enough to bring this information to me. So I think it is certainly your approach, and your approach doesn't have to be familial in terms of us being in the general register, right? Like I'm not your best bud, but I'm not your enemy. So you have to figure out what that looks like for you in terms of your communication style. But that's certainly the foundation of how that works is we can be cool, but recognize that I need you to do certain things as well. And your approach to how you ask and make requests of them goes a long way. I thank everyone all the time, probably more than they care to hear, but I always let them know how much I appreciate them. And when I ask them to do something, I'm like, hey, I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. If you can do that, that'd be great. Um, and when they get it done, hey man, thanks for doing that for me. Ma'am, I appreciate you doing that. great job on it, and keep up the great work. You know, little stuff like that. And that's really that's how I have always maintained balance. And I never, and I will say this too, is your demeanor also helps or hurts. So if you're arrogant and you come off as a know-it-all and no one can tell you anything, you're going to have a lot of problem both with getting commitment, effort, and feedback. But if you're just like, you know, in my position currently, I am not the subject matter expert for most of the things that I need done. So when I go to my team and I ask that subject matter expert, I reiterate, listen, I'm here to help facilitate the solution. You're the person who's going to provide the solution. I don't know, you tell me. And you tell me what we need to be doing. What do you think needs to happen? And giving them that agency and that autonomy and that freedom to solve the problem. And then my job as leadership is to take the solution and make sure that it doesn't meet any roadblocks. So I think that's part of what we have to understand too, is that leadership is about people, management is about processes. So when you talk about making sure that you are relatable to your team and still keeping your level of authority, you know, let the people who do the process do the process. Your job isn't to do the process. Your job is to help put people in the position to execute those tasks. And if you can keep that kind of in the forefront of your mind and realize that your job is to manage the people, their job is to manage the process, you'll have a much greater rate of success.
Okay, thank you for that. So I don't see any more questions at this time. So I'll go ahead and I'll mention that the VI SBDC has so much more in store for you SBI small businesses. You can visit our website at www.vispdc.org. Download the VI SBDC app on your mobile device from the appropriate app store. Like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Google Business, and you can subscribe to the VI SBDC YouTube channel for new uploads of our on-demand webinars. Let me make mention of a few trainings we have coming up until the end of June. We have on June 17th, securing an SBA loan for your business, how to get approved. We have a hybrid workshop happening, basic tree planting, that's going to happen on June 18th in collaboration with the Virgin Islands Agriculture Business Center. We have VBOC presenting on June 18th as well. And they're going to be hosting a webinar at 11 a.m. on the economics of small business startup. On June 24th, we have SBA presenting on business resiliency as disaster preparedness. On June 25th, we have that hybrid workshop for basic tree pruning in collaborating with the Virgin Islands Agriculture Business Center. On June 25th, we have VBOC. They're going to be presenting Introduction to Business Planning. And we have our presenter for today back on June 26th at 11 a.m. And he's going to be presenting the ripple effect, how small steps lead to large wins. So I don't see any more questions at this time. And once again, we'd like to encourage you to take a few minutes after the live event to check your email and fill out that survey that lets us know how we're doing. We'd like to thank everyone for their time and attendance today on behalf of the entire VI SBDC network. Mr. Shazar, it's always a pleasure collaborating with you on these initiatives. And so no more questions, everyone. Wishing you a productive rest of day and do enjoy your weekend.
Thank you guys, and thank you all again. It's always a pleasure. Real quick, I'll just put this back up on the screen if you guys can grab that. You know, again, I am available, and you can certainly reach out to me and we can coordinate. So, Ms. Industrious, thank you so much again. Always a pleasure to be here. It's a privilege. And again, you guys have a great rest of your day.
Likewise.